Welcome to the Minnesota Rovers Tuesday evening presentation. Minnesota Rovers is an outdoors club based in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Our members organize trips that range from 1 hour to 2 weeks in Minnesota or further afield. Examples of our activities include hiking, biking, backpacking, skiing, snowshoeing, paddling, and rock climbing. We also organize conservation and trail clearing trips. Our members have experience and skills in many outdoor activities, so if you want to learn a new outdoor activity, we can probably help you. For more information, go to mnrovers.org. Now let's move on to this week's presentation.
Tonight, our presenter is Kateri Routh. She joined Great River Greening in 2019 as Director of Finance and Administration, and in May 2022, she was appointed Executive Director. With nearly 2 decades of experience in the nonprofit sector, Kateri relies on her community building, strategic planning, and program development skills to lead Great River Greening towards its vision for 2030. Kateri has a master's degree in public services management from DePaul University and a Bachelor of Arts in marketing from the University of Iowa. She's also an avid birder, and if she isn't working alongside volunteers on Great River Greening projects across Minnesota, you can find her with her 2 children and husband in St. Paul, working on her garden and planning her next hike. We're also joined by Great River Greening's new advancement director, Michelle Leon Anderson. After celebrating a decade of raising $132 million for students at the University of Minnesota, she decided to turn her personal passion for ensuring that our natural world remains as healthy and beautiful as possible into her professional pursuit with Great River Greening. So I will hand it over to you two to hear more about Great River Greening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. What a wonderful setup. As mentioned, my name is Kateri Routh. I am the Executive Director. Michelle is online as well. I'm just excited today to get to share with you all a bit more about Great River Greening. Okay, so a quick agenda here. We are going to take a look back and see where Great River Greening got our start in our first 30 years. Talk a bit about our vision for 2030, which we went through a big process the past couple of years to develop that. Take a deeper dive into our programs in action. What do we do in Minnesota? Hit some of those frequently asked questions that we get asked, and talk about our points of pride for 2023 before opening it up for questions. Our roots. So we started in St. Paul along the river. It was a massive community effort in 1995 to green the Great River. There was a lot of discussion about what do we do. You see this picture was part of that work in progress. But when the idea came forward that we should plant and restore native landscaping along the river, then Mayor Norm Coleman latched onto that idea, and this large-scale project got underway. It took 10,000 volunteers planting 35,000 trees and shrubs along that stretch of the river. When that project was complete, the folks that were a part of it said, hey, we want to keep going. We want to do more of this. They developed Great River Greening as a 501c3 to continue that work. Since that time, we have continued based on community, bringing community together to restore over 45,000 acres at nearly 400 sites. Okay, we are going to go through, and you can do a shout out in the comments or raise your hand virtually. Folks, who's visited a St. Paul city park? I certainly have. I live in the Mac Groveland neighborhood. We bought our house here because my husband was a marathon runner at the time, and he wanted to be close to the trails. Turns out that was a huge benefit because we are now going along the river all of the time, which is a park, and we love our access to the river. How about Minneapolis? A plethora of parks. Favorite park in Minneapolis, parks you visited? All over. We love the lakes. We go to Nokomis frequently with our family. And then we zoom out and we look at the regional parks. Favorite parks in the region, we love Lebanon Hills. It's a favorite for my whole family, whether it's birding or hiking or biking. That is a phenomenal park, and there's so many more. And then we expand even further and look at the state parks. And don't worry, I have a point with all of these polls and calling out all of the parks. There are so many incredible places in Minnesota, and Great River Greening has done a lot of work at a lot of those sites, whether it's in the cities, whether it's St. Paul, where we got our start. We expanded throughout the metro after 1995. We are now going even further out into greater Minnesota. We work as far north up into the Mississippi headwaters and farther. We work out west, southern Minnesota, and everything we do is in partnership. So it's all of those different land management organizations or landowners, cities, counties, watershed districts that we are working in collaboration with. So first 30 years, what has Great River Greening done? We've restored nearly over 45,000 acres on over 400 sites with over 47,000 volunteers, planting over 500,000 wildflowers and grasses and over 160,000 trees. When we look at that impact, just take a year of what did that do, say, for carbon sequestration and storage? Last year, 100,000 tons of carbon through our work, planting trees, planting wildflowers, planting forbs and grasses. That's the equivalent of getting 20,000 cars off the road in 1 year, saying nothing of all of the habitat restoration for wildlife, for pollinators, for people. So can I get just a quick pause here? Who's volunteered with Great River Greening before? And I know we were talking about this, but if we have a volunteer that wants to, yeah, we got a hand here. We truly do this work with our volunteers. So the folks on the call that have done this, thank you. I just want to pause. Every time I get a chance to thank our volunteers, I do. One of my favorite parts of the job is getting out in the field on one of those volunteer days to be able to not only work side by side with our volunteers, but thank the folks that have helped us get where we are today. So I love a before and after photo. With this work, it is so dramatic. I'm sure you all know it takes a while. That first year after you restore a site, it may not look pretty, especially if you're doing prairie restoration. It can oftentimes look like a bunch of weeds. Truly takes 2 to 3 years for those to really take root and thrive. This is just one example at Cedar Lake of a project restoring the shoreline, which has the benefit of creating habitat along the shoreline, but also a benefit of cleaning and improving water in that lake. Improved water quality means improved fishing, means improved habitat both onshore and in the water. So I've referenced our vision for 2030. We have been doing really wonderful work for almost 30 years, and the community has really helped us to get into this place. There is a unique need right now to kind of bring this together and say, what are we doing going forward? The University of Minnesota's Climate Adaptation Partnership had a recent survey. It was a couple years ago now, but they surveyed Minnesotans to say kind of how are people feeling, what's the consensus, and I found this really interesting. 76% of folks reported being concerned about climate change. 62% of Gen Z are hopeful that we'll all come together to do enough to reduce the most severe impacts. And 64% think we should prepare by bringing nature into the equation, by bringing these climate resilient practices through land restoration into our toolbox for what can we do to address climate change. So that information came together to build our vision for 2030, which is healthy, climate change resilient ecosystems throughout the entire state of Minnesota. That means using nature-based climate solutions, which is new terminology, but I promise it's not scary. Great River Greening will restore, adapt, and sustainably manage ecosystems to address climate change, providing benefit for both the people and the environment. And you'll see here, we kind of have this diagram showing it's these three components that come into play. It's carbon sequestration and storage, it's addressing biodiversity loss, and it's creating resilient landscapes. So within all of our work, we are doing not just one, but almost in every case, two or all three at the same time. So nature-based climate solutions, what does that mean? These are simply actions to protect and sustainably manage or restore natural systems to address climate change. For us, it means restoring, adapting, and sustainably managing ecosystems to address climate change. And we'll get into more detail when we talk about the hands-on. What is that? What does that mean? I want to call out an important component of all of our work, which is environmental stewardship. It is the people, it is the communities that we are working with throughout the state of Minnesota. It's the core of our work. It's how we got our start. We work with people through hands-on restoration events. We work with folks through educational events, community engagement, talking to the community to see what their concerns are, how they want to address issues, and through our Future Stewards program, which is a school-based environmental youth education and engagement program. We partner specifically with schools to do that work right on school property. All right, let's take a quick pause here and we'll jump into our vision for 2030. It's a video.
People talk about our climate future. They use the term hope. Is there hope? I want our hope to move beyond just being hopeful, and I want to take action to things that can create an impact. We have this decade. After that period of time, some of these effects are irreversible. The vast majority of folks in the United States believe that climate change is real and want to take action on it.
People also think that addressing climate change is by going green, getting a green vehicle or adding solar panels or biking to work.
I love those things and support those things, but there's so much more we can be doing with the natural world around us. There is a really great balance that nature has created. It has figured out a way to manage change and do that naturally. But what we've done is add so much carbon into the air so it can't handle it. We're seeing extreme weather patterns, whether it's floods or droughts.
What normally would be a 2-inch rainfall as a large event, now we're having places over 10 inches in a single day. And a lot of our man-made solutions come with an alternate consequence. So we look at the way that nature has been working for thousands of years and imitating that, and we're finding that's actually the best solution.
So it's planting more trees. It's converting turf to prairie. So those natural plants, whether it's wildflower or grasses, they're sucking up carbon both in the parts we can see above the ground and in their root structure, which for native plants are incredibly deep and long, and they can suck up a lot of carbon.
Sometimes, though, we have to adapt. We have to plant trees, we have to put in prairie species, wetland species that are going to survive in the current climate more so than what would have historically survived.
It has to be community-based and collaborative because there is no one landowner. Whether it's the state, the county, cities, farmers, homeowners, we need everyone to come together around what they can do in the space that they support to address this issue.
Success looks different in our restoration projects and in our community projects and in our regenerative agriculture projects. So when a farmer is going to plant a continuous living cover crop, we know it's going to benefit the environment, it's going to benefit water quality and water storage, but it has to benefit their operation. When we come in for a restoration project, we want to do the best impact possible in those 3 to 5 years that we're working on the site And we want to keep working with them and communicating with them to make sure that that site is maintained. Even the small restoration projects that we do have an impact. And it might not have as much of an impact as a 100-acre project, but we're seeing increased hope and excitement in that community.
Today, you are all environmental stewards. You are here today to connect with and care for this natural space and leaving the land better than we found it. And that's what we will be doing as we get our hands dirty, as we break a sweat, and as we have fun planting plants.
Every kid wants to make a difference. They want to do it now. They don't want to wait. And they want to see their community doing it in support of them.
Well, I'm excited because this is like the second tree planting event that I've been to in the past couple of months. So if these are becoming more and more frequent, we're teaching the kids how to take initiative and do something that can help people and the environment. So seeing that is really, really hopeful.
We are able to do this work on a larger scale than any one individual. And with support from Minnesotans, we can make a real impact.
We want to build that community so there's a collaborative effort to be able to address climate change and habitat degradation.
All right. So that was just a bit of video about our vision for 2030 and how we got there. I am going to jump in now and talk more about our programs in action. The first is our pollinator corridor and ecosystem management work. This is kind of the core of our work, and it's focused on enhancing and expanding habitat, whether it's pollinator habitat or other types of habitat, as well as sustainably managing ecosystems. The example I have is Lebanon Hills Regional Park is just one of our many sites. We have been working with Lebanon Hills and Dakota County for over 10 years. We've been removing invasive species, which is kind of our first step. Often that is buckthorn, using science-based best practices, including things like goat grazing. And then we go back into those habitats and add the biodiversity that's been lost when that invasive species takes over. We've planted many, many thousands of wildflowers and native grass plugs over the years at this site throughout the whole park, with hundreds of volunteers to support these efforts. Another kind of category is adaptive planting, regreening, and reforestation. So planting to adapt to a changing climate is what we would call adaptive planting. So it may mean looking at the zones. Typically what the metro has been, that's changed. Those zones are changing. How can we support some of how plants would naturally shift and migrate and accelerate that to support them during climate change? Regreening is a phrase we use to reference returning developed land to its natural state or landscape. And reforestation, most folks knows that's restoring forests and expanding forests. The example I want to share tonight is about regreening. We have been working in partnership with the state of Minnesota on the Prairie Creek WMA. This is a prairie remnant. So a part of this prairie has never been anything but prairie. And so we are using this undisturbed prairie. We are gathering seeds from that prairie, harvesting those native seeds from grasses and flowers, and using those to sow into adjacent farmland that's been donated to the state. So we are expanding the prairie and regreening former farmland, which is really exciting work. Another quick before and after here. This one is at Ohewahi. We have been working there in Mendota Heights for many years. You'll see it was a turf area here, and it is now a beautiful, lovely prairie in that space. Another program section is our tree canopy work, our work with biochar and sustainable agriculture practices. Tree canopy is pretty straightforward. It's improving the tree canopy in urban communities to cool heat islands. So areas in whether it's St. Paul, Minneapolis, or surrounding suburbs, or even in greater Minnesota, like Owatonna or Faribault, It's planting trees in areas that don't have as healthy of a tree canopy. Biochar is a really cool but sciencey process that sequesters and stores carbon that would otherwise be released in burning waste wood from a project site. And finally, sustainable agriculture practices. It's building community around those practices. The example I want to call out, though, is around tree canopy. In partnership with the state of Minnesota and the federal government, Great River Greening is implementing a large-scale tree canopy project that's starting this year. We, in fact, got funded approval of that funding this fall from the USDA Forest Service to fund our Cooling Minnesota Communities program at a $10 million award for 5 years to plant nearly 10,000 trees. Not only plant those trees, but also water those trees for 3 years after and ensure they stay healthy and thriving to make a really big impact in 5 different communities in Minnesota. Communities being St. Paul, Brooklyn Center, St. Cloud, Faribault, and Owatonna. Another example of our programs in action is Future Stewards. I referenced this earlier, but this is our program that increases student participation and enjoyment in outdoor activities through environmental education. We go and work with currently three partner schools on school property during the school day. And what we're doing is we're teaching students about the benefits of native plants, but also they help design and plant and maintain a native garden, either on school property or adjacent to their school property, which is a really cool year-long process that's been seeing a lot of success. Environmental justice is a long-term, it's an important value of Great River Greening, and it's a long-term impact to reduce disparities and increase public health benefits that come from communal access to green space. We know that folks who have access to beautiful parks, to healthy tree canopies, live a stronger, healthier life. They have cleaner air. They have more reason to go outside and enjoy the environment that's out there. We have a focus on building community input in environmental justice neighborhoods to make sure that any work we're doing there is fitting the needs of the community, making sure we are working in partnership with folks. We have several projects in action. We've been doing work with Frogtown Park, restoring that park there with the group Frogtown Green and neighbors. Our Cool St. Paul tree planting initiative kicked off this past year, where we've been planting trees at St. Paul public school campuses. We've worked with Hamlin Beeline, doing some planting with them in support of their ongoing work. And we've partnered in Minneapolis with the Northside Safety Net, neighborhood empowering teens to do a planting on a garden in their space. Okay, so we're going to hit some of the questions that we get a lot. One of them is, how do we select our sites? It's always in partnership. And it's a combination of what are Great River Greening strategies and goals, and what does the landowning partner, the land managing partner, want to see on their land. And we work together to figure out the best way forward, the best strategy, and we go after funding sources. And I will go into those funding sources next. Oftentimes, it ties a lot to who do we partner with? We partner with the federal government. I referenced that USDA grant. We partner with the state of Minnesota on protected state lands, which can include SNAs, WMAs, and state parks. So that's wildlife management areas or scientific natural areas. Counties through all of their regional parks, soil and water conservation districts, of course, cities, all of their parks and city-owned property. Individual companies and individual landowners, typically not, say, a city property, but someone with 3+ acres where we can really get out there and support them in their goals. How are we funded? We have a variety of funding sources. There are, of course, private funds, funds from individuals, foundations, and corporate grants. There are federal funds. That's kind of a new opportunity for us that we have tapped into. State grants is the core of our funding and has been historically through two different sources of funding. The first is the Environment and Natural Resource Trust Fund. These are constitutionally dedicated funds that come from the lottery proceeds. In fact, this will be up for all of you to vote in support of, if you so choose, in the fall of 2024. The second is Outdoor Heritage Fund. This is one of 4 funds created by the Clean Water, Land, and Legacy Amendment, which uses tax dollars. So both pots of funding, basically, we apply for funding through grants. Okay, what's Great River Greening doing in the past year? Cool St. Paul is one of our featured projects. It's the pilot project that was launched this year in partnership with the school district and St. Paul residents. And what makes this project really unique is it was built on a collaborative process. We brought in a consultant specializing in racial health and environmental equity to kickstart this initiative, where we brought in individuals and we met through multiple sessions to figure out how do we best support the community in addressing heat islands. And we built that, and that was the core of our larger federal program as well, was the work that we started in St. Paul. I have referenced this a couple times, this $10 million grant from the Forest Service. We are in final stages of hoping to sign on the dotted line with those folks, but we are partnering with 5 cities, 3 school districts, and 6 nonprofits, or in St. Paul, public housing agencies, where we will be planting 10,000 trees and watering every single tree that's planted on public property for up to 3 years. We're also supporting communities with the removal of dead standing ash trees, and that is a 5-year program. Last project I will highlight is our agricultural work. This can kind of feel a little different from folks in our classic natural systems, but we see working lands as a really, really critical component of healthy water, healthy soil, and even habitat. We work with farmers mostly in Nicollet County right now, but we work on supporting integration of continuous living cover crops, practices like silvopasture, which is grazing animals on some woodlands and savannas, and planting perennial grains such as kernza, a really cool grain. It's used to brew beer, it's used in some cereals. We have expanded acreage of continuous living cover crops, so that's kind of our highlight in 2023, to over 4,000 acres, which is really exciting for our team. And this moves us to the end. I want to take a minute here and tell you that I'm going to exit my screen share because currently I cannot see folks, but we do have volunteer opportunities. So I'm going to call this out before I take questions. We have so many volunteer opportunities, in fact, that we have them year round now. There are corporate partnership opportunities. Obviously, we welcome donation support. My contact information is here, and I believe Michelle will share in the comments links to some of our social media. So I would love to hear if there are questions that folks have about Great River Greening and what we are up to.
Kateri, do you have plans for the future that maybe you could give us a taste of?
Absolutely. So based on our vision for 2030, we got our start in St. Paul. We are slowly moving into greater Minnesota. Our hope is to expand throughout the entire state. We know that there's a lot more work to be done in the farther reaches of Western Minnesota. Northern Minnesota is out there. We know the boundary waters are up there. We know there's a lot of work that can be done. And so as the lead restoration organization in the state of Minnesota, we will expand to meet the needs up there. We're hearing from more partners that are kind of outside what we used to call our boundaries. And we want to be able to have those conversations and find the funding and say yes to support them.
Do you work with Minnesota Master Naturalists? Because they're always looking for hours so they can keep their accreditation. I can't say the word, but anyway, so they can get the hours. And I haven't heard, I get the newsletter from Minnesota Master Naturalists every week or so. I don't remember seeing a lot from Great River Greening, but I mean, that would be a resource to get more volunteers.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have, we work with master naturalists that volunteer with us. A lot of our volunteer supervisors are master naturalists. So they may have volunteered a couple times and said, you know what, I like this so much, I want to lead other volunteers in doing this. So they go through a training and help us implement our programming. So there are opportunities all over the place, and we do share those online. But if you have resources of different groups that we can connect with, I would absolutely love that. It looks like I've got a couple questions in chat here. First, do we have a project at Lake Elmo Regional Park? That is a great question. While I'm talking about something else, I will look at our map and see if we have one currently. I know we're working in Stillwater along the new Lumberjack Landing. We're working with the city over there, but I'm not sure about Lake Elmo, so I'd have to double check. Helen, hi, I see you've commented here that you have volunteered with us for several events. Thank you. I would love if you would just share your experience, if you'd be so willing to jump off mute, Helen.
Sure. I've done several plantings, everything from trees down to little prairie seedlings. And actually in a couple of weeks, I think I volunteered for one of the seed cleaning events. I haven't done one of those before, but each event has been well organized, and I really enjoyed it. And especially, to be perfectly honest, some of the highlights were working with the kids who showed up to do the events. I still remember the very first event I did. There was a young family and I think a 10-year-old boy saw that I was by myself, and so he came to help me plant trees. And in the couple of hours that we planted trees, I was just totally amazed at how much he knew about insects and trees and mushrooms, and he just was he obviously was very much into the outdoors, so it was just great. And he was there to help plant trees and water them, etc., and do the best job he could. So it's still one of my highlights of all the events that I volunteered for. But yeah, I suggested maybe showing your website and where the calendar is, and so maybe people could bookmark it, because I do get your newsletter. And there are certainly several naturalists I know that show up to get their volunteer hours by attending Green River Greening events too. So that's another option.
No, that's great. And I absolutely love those events. I love bringing my own kids to those events. They have a great time. I've got elementary and middle school. They are family friendly. So if you're considering it, we've had kids as young as 2 or 3 that are out there just playing in the dirt, and they have a great time. And the parents help get some plants in the ground. So I am sharing the volunteer screen here. Go to our website, Great River Greening. You'll see up here, get involved, and you can go right down here to volunteer. Go to this page, and we have a whole list of our public volunteer events, and you can look through and see what's posted. As we get later into this month and next month, we will have more events that are coming up in the spring as well. There's usually a description on each of those. You can click into further detail, but there are a lot of opportunities. So whether it's seed cleaning or getting out there and getting your hands dirty planting, they're all very cool events. Anything else from folks?
Yeah, I just have a question. I live in the city of Minneapolis, and I think the bane of existence for all homeowners in the city of Minneapolis is what I call the city strip, that land between the sidewalk and the street. And I've thought about doing natural plantings there myself, but I'm not much of a gardener. But I'm thinking if the whole city of Minneapolis and St. Paul had their city strips changed to natural plantings, what a awesome thing that would be as far as greening the city. Is that something that's ever been talked about or considered?
So that's a great comment, Roger. What I have heard is that cities are in process, depending on where they're at and depending on community input and support and kind of encouragement. Cities are first starting with removing some older ordinances that may be on the books that say you can only have things that grow a certain height. So there's height ordinances. Those need removed first. I will tell you also, it just kind of depends on where you live and how your neighbors feel about that more natural, wild look. I personally live in St. Paul, and I am slowly expanding my native garden in my own little plot of land here. We do have a section on our front boulevard, that strip, that's city property, that I've planted native plants. They're wonderful. They bring pollinators there. They bring something interesting to look at, even in the middle of winter. They're all still standing out there feeding the birds. But as far as getting the city to move forward on doing that kind of conversion, that would be a very cool project that I have not heard of any conversations around right now. But I have talked to many cities that are interested in city property being converted. So I think it's the city of Maplewood that their city hall, their property is in the process of being converted from turf to prairie. So we definitely work in partnership with folks who want to see that. And I will tell you, there's 3 years to that. Anyone that's grown a native garden will know this. The first year it sleeps. So if it goes by seed, it looks like nothing. The second year it creeps, it's starting. And the third year it leaps. That's the year you're going to see big blooms and things are really going to happen because all the root structure below, that's really incredible. And sometimes even more is going on below ground than above ground. They've really taken root and they're able to thrive and flower.
Yeah, it's hard to be that patient to wait 3 years for that to take.
It is hard. And so I'll tell you, I also am a bit impatient. So that's why people bring in plugs, which are the small version of the plant. So you kind of jump over a year and you get a head start.
Oh, good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Love that some folks that were out at Charlie was at Spring Lake and saw a sign about monitoring pollinators. That is a very cool opportunity, especially folks that are like you that are out there getting around, seeing different spaces. There are citizen scientists that we need to count different kinds of pollinators. There's several different ways folks can learn how to do that, from simply counting the number of any kind of pollinator to helping break them into segments to some hands-on with the support of some other groups where you can even very carefully capture so they can be identified. So there's lots of hands-on work around pollinators that we have. Where can I get native plants for my own yard? That is a great question. Not Great River Greening. We do not sell plants, but we work with a whole lot of partners who do. The key is to look for vendors that are selling Minnesota native plants. You can go to Google and search up many. I would also be happy to share a list with the folks that can be emailed out because we get this question quite a bit. We don't post it on our website. We don't want to play favorites with our vendors, but we have a list of great vendors that do this. Minnesota Native Landscaping is one that I have used for my front yard. Prairie Restoration is another. Mother Earth. Yep, absolutely. Just making sure they're native plants to Minnesota and you'll be good to go. Another great option is if you have a friend who has a native garden and they're very kind, you can get seeds from their plants and do some very organic gardening that way and get seeds and plant them in your own yard. Hiking at Whitetail Woods yesterday, Oak Savanna restoration. Wonderful. Glad you got to see that. I love seeing oak savanna. I was out at Quarry Park further north in Minnesota with a colleague a while back. It's a beautiful park, and the oak savanna there is stunning. And the transformation of removing that buckthorn to be able to see what that oak savanna should look like is beautiful. Prairie Moon, love them as well. Excellent resource. Thank you, Barry. I want to thank you all for your time. Please share any other questions you have. I get really excited about folks who want to be outside in any way, because they tend to be folks that care about what the outside looks like and feels like and is going to be in the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years. So thank you for enjoying Minnesota's outdoors, and don't hesitate to reach out and ask us any questions.
Well, thank you so much, Michelle and Kateri. It was really a pleasure to have you. I see some hands clapping there. So it's great to have you join us.
Thanks for watching this Minnesota Rovers presentation. If you want to see more, please click on the link to our channel or the subscribe button below. Thank you.